Hello, everyone. Um, Today, I'm going to speak about how social media has changed marketing and business, that evolution, the players' uses of social media, as well as get a little bit into data and privacy. So, to dive into it, um, the internet and websites led to e-business, and that led to smaller businesses being able to reach customers much easier, especially customers outside of what was previously a really narrow geographic region. This also helped some of the bigger retailers reach customers outside of the traditional mall and retail stores. It even led to online only businesses, aka Amazon. Um, Social media has an evolution of those websites and e-business, and they have really made it a significant change because it has allowed businesses to start that maybe didn't have the significant capital or the connections or a large marketing team with a significant budget or even economic or political influence to really start a viable business. And now with social media, that has really um, leveled the playing field, and people are starting businesses of all types. Whether you're a model, you're a jump roper, you're starting your own news channel or educational program, you're a clothing designer, trainer, you're selling funny mugs, you're promoting a race, a marathon race. It has really allowed the small businesses to thrive. So, how has social media changed businesses and the different ways that it has changed it? Well, one, there's new advertising opportunities with new methods to target audiences, and that's everything from demographics, interest, past behavior with websites, people's preferences. There's also, in essence, a redefining of grassroots marketing. So in the past, that was a very physical interaction with family, friends, your community, and now that's really taken to the virtual space where um, content and topics are engaging at the grassroots level. Another significant impact is in many ways, customers have become more powerful. They have a greater voice. Customers can cast their opinions on brands, give feedback, complain about services. Um, they can influence decisions and perceptions of businesses and their reputations, and in many ways guide um, or redirect that business's direction. Businesses can use social media to further dive into those customers. There's easy ways to conduct surveys, quizzes, contests, look at reviews, ratings, even publicized testimonials. And then another thing that social media uh, has allowed businesses to monitor their competitors. Just like customers can see everything that a business or a brand is doing in the virtual space, so can competitors. And then along those lines, social media has really redefined brand strategies for businesses. It's really, um, it can work well, it can work bad, but it's really a way to showcase what is that personality of the brand, the values, the culture, and then to highlight achievements, innovations, and again, reaching people at a more personal level than maybe a public relation press release had done in the past. Uh, Another thing for businesses is a lot of the marketing's free. Users generate their own content. You have word of mouth, sharing posts, you have referrals, you have the reposting of content that again can be great and it can also be negative, but that viral distribution of content is in essence free to businesses. Um, and then social media, again, has brought more businesses. Smaller competitors can compete with bigger competitors, and so obviously that has increased competition. Um, another along those lines, back in the day, to run a media campaign, you often had to go to a advertising agency, especially at a national level or across a large geography. You really needed um, to to fork up significant costs to basically enter that advertising space through agencies, and just the logistics of the traditional media space wasn't accessible to smaller businesses, and social media has really changed that. Um, and getting back to brand and culture, you also have this evolution of influencers. Influencers have, in essence, become an industry of their own. Companies paying them, and in essence, they have become a celebrity level for fame and fortune. And then content developers along those lines, podcasters, video bloggers, they're really creating that content that businesses use to drive advertising. That has led in many ways to a discipline in itself, and that's content marketing. And we'll get into that a little bit more later in the course. Um, uh, another thing that social media has done um, is it's really changed how we engage with our political leaders. Um, whether you like them or not, or you watched them on Twitter, one of the things that President Trump did was he was very active on Twitter, which is now X. But even if almost all our politicians are very active on the social media. I would even go back to President Obama did a tremendous job of using social media to get small dollar donors. So again, it has changed the business of politics dramatically. And then you have groups and communities that become another segment or another way to target similar people. Whether it's Facebook groups or Nextdoor has neighborhoods. Again, a way to speak to clusters of people with some commonalities. Um, and then with these new opportunities, uh, there's some things that haven't changed with marketing and the need to be strategic. So um, it has become much easier to run advertising than again back in the day where you had to go through, or often you had to go through a media agency, or you had to work with numerous media outlets or billboard producers. Um, Social media is, in essence, anyone can boost a post. They just have to put a credit card on their account, define who they're targeting, and push some buttons, and there you go. You have advertising, right? But with that ease becomes importance to be strategic and to plan appropriately. Um, Even more so because you can end up diluting your brand or sending way too many confusing messages to your target audience, or targeting audiences that really are outside of your product or service space. Another thing is social media is not the silver bullet. Um, I've been running social media campaigns and leading them for over 10 years. I've probably ran thousands of different campaigns, or my teams have run thousands of different campaigns. And one thing over and over, your target audience, you don't reach everyone. And what I mean by reach them is you've had some level of engagement with a target audience. I would say to achieve, if you're targeting 100 people to achieve more than a reach of 30 of those people, you are doing excellent. And so the reality is you have to supplement, you have to complement, you have to reinforce with other channels and tactics. Uh, if you've taken any of my classes, I say this all the time, but social media is no different. You have to know your customer. So just a perfect example, and I'll give some additional articles to dive into, but if you're using social media to promote your business that targets over 65-year-olds, you probably shouldn't be using TikTok as your platform. But if you're targeting 16-year-olds with a new clothing design or trendy hats or whatever it may be that are appealing to that under 21-year-old audience, TikTok is a great platform, right? So that simple decision, you have to know your customers, and that goes with how you target them on social media, the content you develop, and so forth. And so again, just like any marketing, you will increase your likelihood of success if you really know your customer, and you'll increase your risks of failure if you do not. Um, and along those lines, you need to set clear goals for your campaigns. So, an example, improve brand's perception um, has different goals and KPIs versus direct response or lead gen. And so, a perfect example is brand perception campaigns on social media are really the main thing you're going to be looking at is shares, likes, um, positive responses, that engagement, right? You're really looking for people to um, have an emotional reaction with that content. From a direct response lead gen standpoint, you're really trying to drive them to some other location where you're going to try to make a sale and convert those people. And so you're probably going to, instead of looking at engagement in terms of likes and shares, um, you're going to look at cost per clicks and click through rates and conversions on your website once you go there. And so again, you have to go into those campaigns with a good sense of what is your goal and adjust them accordingly. Getting into data and privacy, and this is just touching the surface. I would say if you're starting a small business, one, it's unlikely that you're going to have a lot of plaintiff attorneys hunting you down for data and privacy issues, but you definitely should dive into this deeper. If you're working for a large company, most likely they have a compliance department or a privacy department that is really going to set some parameters for you to work in. But really, there's uh, three main concerns when it comes to data, and that's data mining. You hear this in the news. Basically the inappropriate use of uh, people's individual data that we capture um, online and how that's used to advertise and market to people. Data breaches, um, and that's really the concern. Like if you're capturing all this data on social media, where's that data being stored? Is it encrypted? Is there a risk of breach? And then data regulations, where um, more and more state governments and national governments are coming out with different regulations around this. I will also say almost any website you go to nowadays has some type of what you'll see as a GDPR, and that's usually a privacy data use opt-in, opt-out. You'll see it usually in the banner, or it's a pop-up window that you have to accept or deny that website's use of data. And again, That's a way for companies to protect themselves to say, hey, we we are acknowledging upfront that we're going to use their data for X way, um, and um, allows you to opt out or opt in. I honestly, I usually opt, actually, I always opt in because one of the things I look at is I kind of like the fact that I get advertisements that appeal to my either past purchases or my interests because it almost helps simplify the internet. I I also didn't pull any content around this, but um, there's a lot of publicity around the algorithms. And all I'll say here around the algorithms is the good thing is like social media, right? There's so many posts, there's so much content out there that the algorithm is serving you up stuff that it thinks you're going to like, right? And again, social media is selling your eyeballs to advertisers, right? Um, that's one of the ways that social media networks and platforms make money is they keep your eyeballs on the site longer, right? And so the algorithms serve up content that they think um, you're going to stay on the site more for. And in some ways, I kind of like that, right? Like I have a golden retriever. I liked, or I follow on Instagram a golden retriever um, uh, page, and I get a lot of other pages that are showing golden retriever content, right? And I find it entertaining, and it's a way to almost make it easier for me to find additional content. Now, where it's bad, and definitely where it came out in um, the political elements, is where those algorithms are really trying to drive people to one um, you know political narrative or another, and so that's serving up I hate to use the word hate, but almost serving up like a negative perception and fueling tensions and emotions. And so that's where algorithms can be, uh, negative. Getting back to data mining, data breaching, data regulations, I did have an experience with this when I got in trouble. Um, and this was just probably 2016, 2017. Um, I had my team run a targeted Facebook ad, and I grabbed a list of consumers, and there was no PHI, there was no sensitive data, but it did have like name, address, email. I had my team loaded up to Facebook, um, and we ran a targeted ad campaign. It was around retention. It was trying to keep our customers to re-engage with us and renew with us. Um, and our compliance, and again, if you work for a large company, there will be a compliance department most likely. Our compliance department felt that um, I was disclosing customer data without their acknowledgement. So, um, and one of the things was um, Facebook refused to take any liability for a breach of data. And I wouldn't either if I was Mark Zuckerberg. But what I had to do was one, I had to send a corrective action plan to the state that campaign was running in and their compliance people. Um, but how do I countermeasured that was I encrypted the data before I loaded it up into Facebook, and that's a whole technical um, uh, technical solution that I'm not going to get into. I had really smart people working for me at the time, but just bringing about the fact that when it comes to data and you dive into it, there's encrypted and non-encrypted. Encrypted data is more protected because if there is a breach, in essence, no one can do anything with the data. Okay, I'm gonna move on from there to data and custom audiences. Um, and this is, again, this was kind of what I was doing where I got in trouble with compliance. Uh, but again, my workaround was I encrypted the data before I created the custom audiences. Um, and it was in the healthcare space, so there's definitely more regulations and privacy risks around that. But um, this is, I mean, this is great, right? Like this is, in almost all the platforms that you can advertise, you can basically build custom audiences off of interest, past website visits, um, different responses. You can create lookalikes. Um, and so I almost look at this as point of sale in the virtual space, right? Like people who are engaging um, with your products already, you can basically create audiences from them um, and target them. And that's one of the things that as we get towards the end of the semester, I'll dive into a little more about how you do that. But this is really where social media it becomes, in essence, an alternative to email in a lot of ways. Now, again, going back to reach, it's really hard to reach more than 30% your target list. Um, but it becomes another way to have uh, to send targeted advertising. And again, if you're a small company, it's also a way to minimize waste of advertising dollars because, again, you have a pretty good sense of, hey, here are people who are already engaging with our product. Or what you can also do is create lookalikes, which are in essence um, people who have similar data trends and behaviors um, and you're targeting them. Sorry, targeting them. Again, for a small company that doesn't have a big budget, it's basically making every penny work even better. So when you get into data, there's basically three layers of data. You've probably heard of this in other marketing classes or anything around data and privacy, but there's first party data. That's basically, again, data that's coming off of, you're building an audience off of that data. They are people that are already, they are directly interacting with a tool of yours, whether it's your website, social media, you've captured their data in your CRM or marketing automation tool. They're in essence, they're they've given you, the way to look at this is they've given you their data, knowing that um, if your company XYZ, if you advertise as XYZ, they kind of know, like, the reason it's called first party data is it's kind of that uh, first party interaction. Then you have second party data, which is um, a little more controversial, but isn't as controversial as third party data. And that's where, let's just say you have a very similar customer to like Verizon, right? And you're into a partnership with Verizon. In essence, both of you are sharing your data because you've identified that Verizon customers, I don't know, like let's say you're selling, cell phone cases, right? Like your customers are very similar. Um, an example of second party data is where you're basically working with those audiences and you're grabbing that list from Verizon. And then again, bringing up the term lookalikes, here in essence, you can create lookalikes off that data. It's a way to expand your data footprint beyond your first party data. Third party data, which is the more controversial one, and this is why um, many of the advertising platforms are moving away from third party data. But this is in essence where you're buying data. And this is much more controversial. This is really the area that's been in the news. And the idea here is, Facebook and other tech companies, Twitter, They're in essence gathering your data and selling it. Same thing, and same thing goes for other websites, like a mortgage company. You complete an online form to get a mortgage or a car loan or a credit card, right? People are those companies are often selling that data. Now, again, you go to those websites, 99.9% of them will have you opt in or opt out of their data policies. And if you really read into it, often they may be selling your data um, to companies to advertise. And some of those companies are LiveRamp, Axiom, ZoomInfo. Um, I've used them. I mean, it's a great way to find people that you're having trouble finding that are likely your customers. So that's data and customer audiences. Again, custom audiences will continue to hit that because that is a big part of how you advertise on the social media platforms and in the various advertising platforms. Uh, and then finally, some additional readings. Basically, I have three links here. Um, One is around the history and evolution of social media. A pretty good article, does a pretty good job. I will even say relatively recent, like so all of these are relatively recent. One of the reasons why I feel like a textbook just is going to really have a hard time keeping current. I would say there's even new social media sites that have come up since then, um, and so again, ever-changing space. The next one is how the U.S. Uses social media for news, and I think this is a really good example of looking at the trends. They split it out by politics and by platform. And then the final article, so again, looking at people who are consuming news on social media are more likely an older demographic than in essence teens. Um, and so the third article is about social media uses amongst teens. Um, the last two articles are both through the Pew Research Center, a great online resource. I highly recommend it. But again, going back to knowing your audiences, right? Like on the article about news consumption, Facebook is number one, right? And what's interesting is Facebook is even, and especially in other countries, looking at moving away from offering news content. Um, but social media amongst teens, like Facebook, doesn't perform very well at all, right? And so again, looking at your target, knowing your customer, at a basic level is going to also indicate or also going to drive what platform you go to market. So with that, uh, this was a little longer than my last video. I will also post just the slides as well. But hopefully you found it interesting. I hope everyone has a great week. Thanks.